Hello everyone, my name is Amaka and you're welcome to Lizama Stitches. In this tutorial, we are going to be learning how to make this box pleated dress with front buttons and princess dart bustier. Now this is a continuation of our previous tutorial on how to make a box pleated dress. I'm going to leave the link of that video in the description box below so that you can watch it before watching this one. If you've not subscribed to this channel, please click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified whenever I upload new videos. So let's get started. Now this is the back panel and this is the front panel. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to join the front panel and the back panel together, just like this. Now I've sewn this part, I've sewn here, I've sewn the front panel and I've ironed it down and I've closed in my darts. So the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to place this on this and I'll sew right side facing right side. I'll sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance and I'll sew the shoulder with 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll sew with 1.5 inches seam allowance and I'll sew with 1/2 inch. Now the same way I'm going to sew this, I'm going to sew the lining. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. So now after sewing, this is what I have. This is the main fabric and this is the lining. Now the next thing I'm going to do is this. Now I'm going to bring this, I'll bring this and I'll join it together. Now this is what I'm going to do. I'll turn it right side facing right side and I'll sew the button allowance. I'll sew the button with 1/2 inch seam allowance. When I sew the button with 1/2 inch seam allowance, then I'll turn it inside. I'll push the lining inside just like this and I'll have something like this. This part will be closed by then and I'll have something like this. Now after which I'm going to now sew the neckline. I'll join the neckline, I'll join the lining and the main fabric together. Now I'll sew it and I'll stop here, leaving my zipper allowance. I'll sew from here and I'll stop here, leaving my zipper allowance. So the same way I'm going to sew this, I'm also going to sew this. So I'll do it and show you the outcome. So after sewing, now this is what I have. So now this is the wrong side. When you open it, you see that see how the lining is inside. This is the wrong side and this is the right side. The same thing with this one. Now the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to overlap this, the front. I'll bring the front together and I'll join the lower part. I'll join the lower part with, I'm going to join it here. I'll sew here together just to join the lower part together. Now before I do that, I'm going to run a straight stitch here and I'll run a straight stitch here. Then I'll bring these two together and I'll place it. I'll place it together by 1 inch because the button allowance is 1.5 inches and I've sewn in 1/2 inch, so I'm left with 1 inch. So I'm going to place this 1 inch on top of this and I'll sew it this way. So after that, I'm going to do that, then I'll show you how to join the lower part to the upper part. This is the lower part of this dress. The full length of this dress is 42 inches, while the upper part is 17 inches. So we are going to minus 17 inches from 42 inches, and that gives you 25 inches. Plus 1.5 inches hemming allowance, that gives you 26.5 inches. Plus 1/2 inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to join the upper part to the lower part, and that gives you 27 inches. So what I have here is 27 inches. What I have here is 27 inches. Now let me show you how to achieve the box pleat. All you need to do is to mark 3 inches interval. Now I'm going to mark 3 inches here. I'm marking 3 inches interval. Now this is optional. You can actually use 1.5 inches or 2 inches intervals, depending on how big or how small you want your pleat to be, but I'm using 3 inches intervals. Now I'm going to mark these 3 inches till I get to the end of this fabric. So I've marked my 33 inches intervals. Now what I'm going to do, now this is how I'm going to pleat it. I'm going to hold this part, this point. This is 3 inches. This is 3 inches and this is 3 inches. So I'm going to hold this point. I'll push in this part and I'll make it, I'll bring it to this point, to this 3 inches mark. So this is the first one. Let me pin it down. So I'm going to be working with my pins. Now for this, now this is 3 inches and this is 3 inches. So I'm going to hold this and I'll push in this and I'll bring this to meet this. And I'll pin it down. So now the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hold this. I'm going to hold this. Now I'm pulling this to meet with this one, to meet with this. Now this is a 3 inches mark, so I'm pulling it to meet with this one and I'll pin it down. Now after that, I'm going to pinch this. Now I'm going to bring this. After that, I'm going to bring this and I'll push this in. Now I'm bringing this to come and meet this. And I'll pin it down. So for this, now I'm going to hold this. I'm going to pinch this. So this is to meet this. And I'll pin it down. So the next one I'm going to hold this. And I'll bring this to meet this. Take note, there is a mark here and there's a mark here, but I'm holding this one. So there's a mark here and there's a mark here, but I'm bringing this. I'm putting this one is going inside. So there's a mark here and there's a mark here. I'm bringing this, and this one is going inside while this one is coming to meet this. So I'm going to do this. So this is what I'm going to do till I get to the end of this fabric. Now I'm done with the pleats. Now this is it. What I have here is 37 inches. Now the client's waist circumference is 34 inches plus 3 inches zipper allowance. Now when I say 3 inches, 1.5 inches for one side and 1.5 inches for one side, that gives you 3 inches. So 34 plus 3 inches gives you 37 inches. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the midpoint. I'll find the midpoint of this, and the midpoint is 18.5 inches. So I'm going to mark, this is the midpoint. This is the midpoint. I'm going to fix it on the midpoint of the upper panel, upper part. Now, this is the upper part. Now, this is the midpoint of this. I'm going to pin it on this midpoint, and I'll sew. I'll sew it to this point, and I'll sew this to this point, leaving the zipper allowance. I'm going to sew it and I'll leave the zipper allowance. So I'll sew it to this point, and I'll sew this to this point, leaving the zipper allowance. So I'm going to do it and show you the next thing to do. But before I do this sewing, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm going to secure this with a long stitch. I'll secure this with a long stitch. Now, another thing I did on this shirt, another thing I did on the upper part, I had to sew the button allowance with 1 inch. I just did a long stitch, like a straight stitch on the button allowance. So this is the button allowance. This is the button allowance. So I'm going to do it. I'll take this to my sewing machine and I'll do everything I said, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. So after sewing, now this is what I have. So this is inside. This is inside. Now this is the zipper. You see the zipper is inside. Now I'm going to use my overlocking machine to finish the waist and also finish this part. So let me show you how to fix the collar. So this is the right side. Now this is my band. This is what I'm going to use for the collar. And what I have here is, I've already ironed in the seam allowance. So this is 2 inches on fold. Half inch is for seam allowance, then 1.5 inches is for the collar. And it's by 2 inches by 18 inches. 2 inches by 18 inches. So one is going to be for one side and the other one is going to be for the other side. So let me show you how to start. Now I'm going to use this pin. I'm going to be using this pin, this hook. I'm going to be using this. Now this is how I'm going to use it. On the edge, I'm going to close here. I'll close here with half inch. I'll sew half inch and then I'll turn it to the right side. Now before I do that, I'm going to fix this thing. I'm going to fix this thing. I'll fix one here. I'm using 2. I'll fix one here. Now this one, this. So I'll fix one here and I'll fix one here. And I might use my, let me use my needle and thread to hold it down before taking it to my sewing machine to sew it. So I'm going to use my needle and thread to hold it down, to secure it. So this is the second one. So now this is just to keep it at a place. Now when I take it to my sewing machine, I'm going to turn it this way and I'll sew. Now as I'm sewing, I'll make sure that I'm sewing this thing, I'm catching this thing, because this thing has to be inside. So after sewing, when I turn it to the right side, the hook will be outside. The hook will be outside like this. So that's the idea. Now that's it with this hook. So let me show you how to fit this to the collar, to the neckline. Now this is my zipper. I'm going to open my zipper allowance. Another way to do this is to attach this thing before attaching your zipper. That's another way to do it. When you attach this thing before attaching your zipper, which means okay, let's assume that this thing is like this, which means your zipper is going to start from here. But I didn't do it that way. So now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold this way. Now I'm leaving half inch I'm removing ½ inch seam allowance, which I'm going to use to sew this part. So I'm going to sew this just like this with ½ inch seam allowance. I'll sew it round to the front. I'll sew it round to the front. Now after that, I'm going to bring this. Okay, let me illustrate with pin. Let me illustrate with pin. So after sewing with ½ inch seam allowance, now I'm going to push this inside. Now this seam allowance, I'm going to push it inside and I'll sew it this way. So I'm going to sew it and to this point. Now before I start sewing here, I would have sewn here. So that's how I'm going to sew here. But before I start sewing here, I would have sewn here. I'll turn this part like this and sew. I'll turn this part like this and sew. Okay, let me notch it. I'm going to notch here. So before I start sewing here, I would have turned this part this way and sew. I'll sew it and I'll get to that point that I notched. Then my collar is now going to stop. I'll now sew this to this point, and when I turn this, I'll sew this to this point. So that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and I'm going to do all these things that I just said now. Now let me show you another thing that I'm going to do. Now when you look at that picture, you see that the one on the picture is somehow curved. So I'm going to cut this. So this is the first one and this is the second one. So I'm just going to place this together and I'll just trim this part a little. Just a little trimming. So that's just it. So I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and I'm just going to do everything that I've told you. Then I'll do it and show you the outcome. Now the same way that I'm going to fix this. Now this is the hook. One is the hook and one is the eye. So this is the eye. So this is for one side and this is for the other side. Sorry. So this is for one side of the zipper. This is going to be for one side of the zipper, while this is a hook. It's going to be for one side of the zipper. So the same way I'm going to fix this, I'm also going to fix this. So I'm going to do it and show you the outcome. So now let me show you what I've done so far. So now I've fixed my hook. Now the hook is inside. I've fixed the hook inside, from inside, just like I said I was going to sew it. I've fixed it from inside and I've sewn one side of the collar. And I stopped here. Now the next thing I'm going to do, now I've turned, now this is my collar. I've turned this part to the wrong side and I've sewn this part halfway. I've sewn it halfway. So I'm going to continue sewing. I'm going to sew to this point and I'll stop here. I'll stop at this point. At this point, that's where I'll stop. Now, when I stop here, I'm going to turn this to the right side. Now, let me do that. This is my needle and thread. So let me sew it. So I'll sew it to this point, and I'll turn it to the right side. When I turn it to the right side, I'll now turn this. I'll now turn this and sew. And I'll sew from here. And I'll sew neatly. I'll sew it neatly and I'll come back to this part. By then, I've already turned this part to the right side. So after sewing, this is my dress. Now I've sewn the neck, the collar. I've sewn the collar. Now this is what it looks like. So this is the back. You see the hook. See the hook. This is the zipper. Now this is inside. So this is inside. I'm going to use my overlocking machine to overlock here, to finish here neatly. Finish the waist neatly. Then for the so this is the hook. So now the next thing I'm going to do is this. I'm going to fix my buttons. I'm going to fix my buttons. So I have these buttons. So I'm going to fix my buttons. I'll fix my buttons and I'm going to open the buttonhole and I'll fix the buttons. After that, I'll fix the buttons to this point. Okay, so let me hold this down with pins. Let me pin this down. So I'm going to fix my buttons. So after fixing my buttons, now this part, now look at what I'm going to do on this part. On this part, I'm going to twist it this way. I'm just going to twist this part. Now this, look at how it is. Now this part, look at how it is. I'm just going to twist it this way. I'll just twist it and I'll bring it to this point. I'm going to fix a button here. I'm going to fix button here and I'll also fix button here. And that's just it. I'll put buttons, 2 buttons here and here. And so that's just it. That's just it for the neck. Now for the sleeve, I'm using a different sleeve entirely. So I'm going to stop here with this tutorial. I'm going to stop here because the sleeve I'm using is a different sleeve entirely. So I'm going to do it off camera. For the belt, I've done my belt already. Now this is my belt. This is the belt I'll be using for this dress. So this is the belt. I have a tutorial on how to make this belt. I'm going to leave the link of that tutorial in the description box below so that you can check it out later. So this is the belt I'm going to use for this dress. So that's just it with this dress. I'm going to do all these things that I've said and I'll show you what it looks like. If you found this tutorial helpful, please click on the like button. Share this video with your friends. Share this video in your sewing groups. Subscribe to my channel if you've not done so. Feel free to ask questions. I'll be in the comment section to answer all your questions. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.